Hey, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tonight we've got a very special call, and I couldn't be more excited to be introing this special guest here. Tonight we've got the 5 surprisingly simple storytelling secrets that you can swipe to maximize your influence, attract more customers, and spread your impactful message. My name's Mike Budney, and I'm the marketing director for Revolved Enterprise. I'm just co-hosting this call. You'll see Yannick Silver on there, but it's me, so don't get confused there. And again, I couldn't be more thrilled to introduce you here to our special guest for this live presentation. Now, I've been working with speakers, authors, coaches, and in that space for well over 13 years now. And I've met many multi-7 and 8-figure high-profile influencers that speak professionally and that use stories specifically as their platform. And I'll just tell you that Patrick Combs, by far, is the best I've ever met, handedly. Now, I want to give you, this cannot be said well enough by me, so you're going to have to excuse me here in me delivering this to you. But I really want to give Patrick a proper introduction here, because I believe his master of storytelling and how he goes about crafting what he's done over the years is best understood by examining his exceptional body of work over that period of time. Patrick's been invited to speak with well over 1,500 organizations globally, and he's been doing this full-time for well over 22 years. World-class companies like Google, Qualcomm, Visa, Shell, Boeing, Motorola, Enterprise, and Hilton, just to name a few, have brought him in to speak. And not only that, but he's been a best-selling author, over 150,000 copies of his book, Major in Success. And those are just a couple of quick highlights on him. But a little inside fact for you here that perhaps Patrick can expand on really briefly for us are 9 hard-fought years constantly crafting and fine-tuning his wildly now famous one-man show, which is entitled Man One Bank Zero. Through that process, Patrick has really started getting recognized by major publications nationally as a master storyteller. And I would just say that through that body of work and Patrick's passion for constantly improving his craft, which has been a theme for as long as I've known him, and has really inspired me, is really what sets him apart from everybody else I've met in the space. And that's why I say handedly, because I really mean it. Patrick, really appreciate you being able to show up here and contribute some amazing content for us, man. I know you're going to give the goods out. Welcome, man.
Oh, thanks so much, Mike. I'm really happy to be here. Obviously, especially on this topic that means so much to me personally and professionally. So I have a hour planned for us, and it's a really full hour, and we may even have time to take some Q&A and do some live story work on this. But I thought I'd dive in on a little bit of a story about myself in relationship to story. I look back and I think of it as an incredibly life-defining moment. 1992, in a small theater in San Francisco, watching storyteller Spalding Gray sit behind a desk on stage and engross the entire audience with a story about trying to finish his novel. The show was called Monster in a Box, and that night changed my life. I left that night with this burning desire to entertain people with stories from my life. Way back then, I was way too terrified to do it on stages like he was doing so masterfully. But what I did is I began to write my stories down, one story at a time, and I had no idea how to write a good story. So I bought Spalding Gray's book of personal stories, and I was trying to study the technique, read in between the lines, see how he started a story, how he made a transition in the story, how he added humor into a story, how he ended a story, how he chose his stories. I was underlining the book and circling words and trying to notice patterns. So I started writing these stories. I was early in my 20s, and story after story that I wrote honestly sucked. I just sucked at writing. And I can say that full transparency, and I'm not exaggerating. So I was about 2 years and 10 stories deep into trying to learn this craft when something very unexpected and wonderful happened in my life. This $95,000 junk mail check arrived at my home in my mailbox, and ended up giving me one hell of a story to tell. The only problem was that it was an Everest of a story. It was a very long story because it was a 6-month-long story that just went on and on and on. And so writing this story up came with more demands than I had ever come close to facing. So before that, I'd been climbing hills in my backyard, and suddenly I felt like, oh, I've got this great story to tell. There's gold in this mountain, but the mountain was like K2. So from short story to almost like a novel. But although I was very frightened, honestly, of storytelling at the time, I was very intimidated by the story in front of me. I threw myself into that story with total abandon. I never, ever forget 6 days, 6 nights, writing that story, but only taking breaks long enough to cram some food in my mouth or sleep for 4 hours. Then I'd be back up again, totally immersed in the writing from sunup to long past sundown. And I remember when I hit that glorious point of no return, when the writer, when the storyteller stops writing story and the story starts writing itself. Here's what I'm saying. I was getting a crash course in my young 20s at completely committing to the art and the mastery of story, even though I was an absolute beginner. At the end of those 6 days and those 6 nights of obsession with story, I was thoroughly wiped out, completely exhausted, but I had my story written. I posted it online, and it absolutely exploded into an internet sensation. And it might not be outrageous to say that in 1995, when I posted that story, which eventually became my book, Man One Bank Zero, that at the time it was probably the most popular personal story on the internet for several years. It achieved millions upon millions of readers. I got thousands upon thousands of emails. And here's the thing, the attention of that mountain of a story about the junk mail check, it rubbed off onto the handful of other stories that I had written, and what it gave me was an unexpected asset, a reason to keep diving into the mastery of story. There's nothing like one hit story in your life, one successful story that gets the job done for you, that people love to hear, that bonds people to you, that opens up the right questions, that expresses your values. There's nothing like that one story begetting another story in your life and another story in your life. And we're going to talk about that as one of the secrets, the 5 secrets that I'm bringing out to this call today. But that is the story of how I got started personally on my mastery, my craft of story. And when I say mastery, of course, all I mean is I'm in it for the craft. I'm in it for the mastery. I don't think you ever obtain mastery, but you can make gains, and those gains show. Those gains develop into reliable techniques of the trade, and those gains you get to keep and apply over and over and over. So I want to share with you on this call 5 of the greatest lessons in story. So why story? I use story to multiple effect. But let's think about why you might use story. So personally, you heard in the introduction, for 23 years I've been an inspirational speaker on stage. I've been invited in by businesses, and at the heart of every single speech that I do, if that speech is going to be successful, the stories have got to be there. They've got to be right. They've got to be told well. They've got to be completely engaging. They have to have a fantastic lesson at the end of it. They have to be performed. So at the highest levels of inspirational speaking and keynote speaking, story is the requirement, even a greater requirement than humor. And stories are almost always what conveys the humor. Now, the second way that I've employed story in my life depended on it to make a living is, as was mentioned in my bio, is I developed 11 years ago a one-man comedic theater show, which means I go into a theater on Friday night. Last week they saw Beauty and the Beast. This week they're seeing me. There may be 500 people that bought a $60 ticket, and my job is to walk out on that stage and for 2 hours entertain the audience with only a story. And in inspirational speaking, I thought I'd learned some things about story. But when I finally ran into the tightrope 400 feet above the ground that is a one-man show that's based entirely on story, and you don't get off that tightrope for 2 hours, I didn't know anything about story. That's when the mastery and the techniques really cranked up because the demands were so high. So I think what I'm trying to say is I don't just loosely believe in the ideas I'm going to share with you. I depend on them to make a living. I depend on them in what feels like when you walk out on a stage and you got a paying audience in front of you, whether that paying audience is Hilton or that paying audience is New York City, a theater audience in New York City, these storytelling techniques can feel like life or death. Because if you've ever died on a stage, then you know what kind of death I'm talking about. So it's to say, these secrets I'm going to share with you, techniques called, and I call them secrets only because most people don't know them. They don't know to employ them. I'm just telling you, like from the bottom of my being, they work. And they're reliable and they're trustworthy. So I'm really happy to share them with you as they are so important. But so you can see here the two aspects that I use to deliver, that I depend on these storytelling techniques for. But let's go into the other ones that perhaps are even more relevant to you. All right. So at some point in time, I started coaching people to be better speakers, to employ story to greater effect. And wonder of wonders, miracle of miracles to me, in the last couple of years, I've had over 30 clients. And those clients show me all the applications of story, a wider application of them. I'll give you an example. One of my coaching clients, the CEO of a really successful multiple city video production house, gets invitations to speak for his business around the community. If those talks go well, if he can tell stories well in that, tell his story about what his business does, he can win multi-million-dollar accounts like HP. I have another client who makes his living out there on the circuit doing keynote speeches combined with hypnosis. The better he is at those keynote speeches, the more money the more word-of-mouth booking there is, repeat booking. That's how speaking careers rise. In a completely different use of it, I have a client down in Brazil, and she Skypes me in order to succeed with her YouTube channel. Because at the heart of a success, she's got a coaching business, personal coaching business, and at the heart of a successful coaching business is really great YouTube videos that are centered around great stories. And we'll talk about what great stories are here in a minute. And then even in two completely different categories, perhaps you're a CEO. I've had CEOs come to me recently, CEOs of upstart companies, maybe a staff of 6 people, and they're still building momentum and getting the word out about what they do. And so they'll come to me and they'll go, this is the keynote, this is the story I'm planning on telling about our business at this next upcoming conference. And I'll say, show me what you got, and 90% of the time I'm going to go, oh my gosh, that is not going to get the job done with what you're hoping in your heart. I can tell you where that's going to fail, why that's going to fail, because I have failed that way multiple times. Let's fix that. And then it's beautiful to watch CEOs fix their messaging about what their company mission is, about what their company values are, about what their company does, and watch it scoop up the business at conferences and with audiences and with investors, because now the story is clear and compelling. Crazy enough, And last one I'll mention, besides keynote speakers, authors a lot, but crazy enough is even presidents of universities, of a major university, comes for coaching because he knows that every time he has an opportunity to speak in the community, every time he has an opportunity to tell the story of the university, it's an opportunity to either add investors and shareholders to the university's actions, to build that community and team momentum, or to lose ground or wasted opportunity. And then there's when people go, I'm making a video about my company, and the video is always a story. So maybe you're in one of those categories and you're recognizing you've had the moment where you go, story matters in today's business world. Story is marketing, story is sales, story is branding, story is bonding. So all the right reasons. My highest hope is that you've come to this table because you recognize the value of story, and when we wrap up this short hour, you'll be further in love with story, because I'm in love with story, and it's actually a secret that I'll share with you. As one of the great secrets to storytelling is you've got to fall in love with story. When you fall in love with story, it brings out your best storytelling instincts. And most people that I coach are not yet in love with story. They're dating story. And as a result, it shows in their stories. The lack of commitment, the lack of attention to detail, the lack of romance, if you will, even in a business story. It's just stories fall flat because there's not a person, the person telling the story isn't really all in on it yet. So we'll cover some of those things. So welcome to story and some secrets about story. First slide up. What's your story? If we were coaching together, that's the first thing I'd ask you. That's what I ask all my clients. So great, tell me a story. Tell me your story. And they got to dive in. Look, that makes people scared. That makes people nervous. That makes people babble. That makes people start making excuses. Like, oh okay, well, this is, whatever. That's the challenge. You're an entrepreneur. What's your story? Okay? And that's a challenge when you're in an investor meeting sometimes. That's a challenge when you're stepping on a stage. That's a challenge when you're picking up the phone and you're talking to an individual about your business, or you're bumping into somebody at the coffee shop. So what's your story? Okay. We've talked about why story matters, and I've even challenged you to suggest that you are currently undervaluing your story. And I can't emphasize that sentence enough. Please embrace, just accept that, write that down, you're currently undervaluing your story, and live with it on this call, because I'd rather you presume that you're dramatically undervaluing your story than presume that you've got the right price tag on it. Here's what I mean by that. In my life now, I understand clearly that a great story is worth thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. A great story is worth that much. People pay tons of money for a story, if you will. So that's one way you maybe, like, you've got a story. Here's my thing. You've got a story. And when it's properly told, it will generate so much income. That's what stories have the capability of doing. Now, by undervaluing it, I don't by any means just mean money. Undervaluing a story means you've got a great story that I'm guessing you're overlooking, because all my clients overlook the vast majority of their great stories. You've got a great story that isn't just worth dollars and cents to you, but it's worth doors open. It's worth new friendships. It's worth new synergies. It's worth new places that would retail your product. It's worth viral videos. It's just sitting there in its untapped treasure. And why do you say, what's the deepest place I come to that you're undervaluing your story? I would tell you, I would share this from my life. I did have this check incident happen to me in my life. The one I referred to, this junk mail check incident happened. And I thought it was cool. And I would kind of tell the story to a couple friends. But if you had walked up to me at that point in time, before I'd written that story out, before I'd crafted that story, before I'd worked on that story a lot, and you had said, that story is worth millions of dollars, and that story can take you around the world, and that story can open more doors than you can ever imagine, that story can land on the front cover of the Wall Street Journal, that story can land on the Financial Times 20 years later, would I have believed you? Of course not. Of course not, because it was an undeveloped hidden treasure in my life. But that turned out to be true. So if I've learned anything about story, it's that chances are you're undervaluing it because you haven't dug up your best stories yet. And when you dig them up and you craft them, just like you polish up a diamond, cut up a diamond and polish it up, suddenly you go, I had no idea how much that story could do for me, how much that story was worth. So that's point number one. I'll give you an example of this, all right? This is Blake, who started the shoe company Tom's. A lot of people think that Tom's shoes might have been started by a guy named Tom, but Tom is short for tomorrow's shoes. That's Blake. And Blake has an epically successful business play, company on his hands. It's not just financially super successful, but it's also socially super successful. It's also successful as a meme in the world that stands for goodness and sharing. You know, so Tom Shoes, buy a shoe, and a shoe gets given away to kids that need shoes. So at the heart of the success of Tom Shoes, it's certainly justifiable to say is the story. The story is probably the single greatest attribute, the secret sauce in why Tom Shoes was successful. Now, I just wrote out the story in the shortest form possible here so that you could just eyeball it. So Blake said, here's my story. I saw children in Argentina who needed shoes and couldn't go to school without them. I got this idea for a one-for-one business model. Somebody buys a shoe. We give a shoe to one of those kids. I made 3 duffel bags of shoes before I left Argentina. I took them back to Los Angeles. I started selling them out of my apartment and telling everybody the story. And of course, Blake had his own variations on that story, a longer format, a shorter, not a shorter format, but a longer format and various different ways of telling it. But that's a great story. And that story was so good that it energized almost everybody that heard it to want to buy those shoes, to want to help those kids, to create a win-win. That story is so good it started landing that company and Blake into magazines, onto magazine covers, into stores like Nordstrom's that would normally never consider an upstart shoe company being run out of somebody's apartment. But you can never underestimate the extraordinary magical power of a story that's compelling and that's told right. Okay, so if you're looking for an example of what story can really do for business, look no further than Tom Shoes. Google it after this call and listen to him tell the story in various ways on his own. Okay. So secret number 1 is choose the richest story to tell. So a lot of people come and here's what I'm thinking for you, is I'm thinking when you go, what's my story, you have a lot of options, whether you realize it or not. So you might say to me, okay, here's my story, and you might tell me a story. I'm very likely to say, great, tell me another story. And then you might tell me another story, and I go, great, tell me another story that might be it. Because in the beginning, you got to fish around to find the right story. And the right story is the richest story. And the richest story is the story that has humanity, emotion, drama, heart. And a lot of people in business make the mistake of thinking, so I'm looking for a story of success, right? I'm looking to tell you a story of kind of the chronological order of my business success so that you understand chronologically, factually, and impressively how I got to where I am. And the answer is, please, God, don't. Like, please don't. Please be a human being for me. Please tell me a good story. The difference is dramatic. I'm going to go to the example. You can hear it in my own words now, but I'm going to go to the example that I wrote up in a blog post right before this webinar, and I'll expand on it a little bit more. But I had a coaching client, and the coaching client was enormously successful in software in a way that really impressed me. And I said, okay, what's your story? And he told me the story of his enormous success in software companies. He even told it in a humble way. Right? Wasn't being braggadocious in any way whatsoever. He was just telling me in a factual manner. So here's the deal. I succeeded at this software company, then I succeeded at this software company, and then I succeeded at this software company. And truth be told, too, I think he began the story with, look, I moved to San Francisco, and I didn't really know anything or have anything. It was hard. It was a hard beginning, but I created those successes. Now, I perfectly understood why he was telling me that story, because that story has a place, and that's the story that in this society, certainly in Western society, maybe particularly to the United States of America at this particular time, most entrepreneurs think that's the story that they should be telling. They should be telling a story that's of impressive success. And it's really misguided. It's really just incorrect. It's an incorrect story suggestion. It's an incorrect story assumption. It's bad storytelling. So unfortunately, it's just what most people think they're supposed to be doing. So if you look at the screen, I'm guiding you in a different direction. I'm saying one of the greatest story secrets I've ever learned is no, stop trying so hard to establish credibility. It's so easy to establish credibility. Let your bio establish credibility. Let your introduction establish credibility. Let the end of your story establish credibility. Okay? Establish humanity. Establish an interesting story. How do you get to an interesting story? Emotions and drama and humanity, perhaps vulnerability. So that's what I want you to do for storytelling. For secret number one is, hey, look for one of those moments in your life. Forget about your business success. We can communicate that at the end of the story or later. But tell me about a moment in your life that I can lean into and go, oh my gosh, that really happened to you? Wow. So in the case of the entrepreneur that I was speaking of with the software successes, I prompted him to tell me a life-changing moment, and it was sitting there because he had this notion that it might be the better story to tell, but he was seeking guidance and reassurance and crafting to make this story an okay story to tell. But he was also really cautious that maybe it's a story he should never tell. But the story that he ended up telling me was at 17 years old. I think I got it wrong in my blog post. I don't know if it's 17 or 19, but listen. At 17 years old, I'm sitting in a stolen car, surrounded by police officers. And I've got a backpack in the passenger seat. And I'm reaching into the backpack because I know there's a gun in there. And I'm thinking about killing myself because there's no way I'm going back to juvenile detention. Now, that's only the first part of the story. I'll give you a little bit the next part of the story that we end up crafting together of his real story. But I want to stop right there and point out what that story is doing that the other story wasn't. That story is a put down your fork moment. That story is a, whoa, what did he just say? That story is a, the movie's on, shh, I got to hear how this ends. That story is a, what the, are you kidding me? That happened to you? Now, that's quite dramatic. But two things. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. But if you've got something, let's look at it. Let's figure out if it's a great story for you to tell. Okay? If it's not that dramatic, I still want you to look for the moment that for you that was dramatic, because it doesn't have to in any way be that dramatic to be an excellent answer to so tell me your story. Now what happens next in his, but did you feel it? It feels like a movie. It's visual. Is it emotional? Oh, it's so emotional. A human being might kill himself, right? Is it dramatic? He's surrounded by police cars in a stolen thing. There's a gun involved. Of course it's dramatic. Is there humanity in the story? Yeah. It's dripping with humanity. He's 17 years old. His life's on the line. And in some way, all of us can relate to that, to those really difficult teenage years, to overcoming something incredible in our life. So that's what a good story can do for you. Even a business story, because listen to how the story continues. I ended up going back to jail. Fortunately, I didn't do anything with that gun. I'm approximating here because the coaching happened a long time ago, but the story's easy to remember. So he goes, but when I was back in juvenile detention, prison for teenagers, I discovered a book about programming. And I took it up. I had nothing but time on my hands. And programming changed my life. It gave me a positive focus. And I learned programming and I built my first software company. And it literally saved my life because some of the friends that I was hanging out with at that age didn't make it. I went on to found, start and sell 3 successful software companies. But my deepest reason for being in the software business and now the knowledge space business is to help other people overcome really incredible odds and be all that they can be. Something to that effect. Now, we timed that story. When you craft a great story, I want you to know what's happening behind the scenes. What's happening behind the scenes in great story is writing. And in that writing is exacting, is chosen details, is the right word. How about this word instead of that word? This word says it better than that word. Reverse those sentences. Oh my gosh, that's it. Read it out loud to me. That was 90 seconds. Whoa, in 90 seconds. Did you hear everything we just accomplished? 90 seconds. That's an elevator pitch. That's a coffee conversation. And yet now we know that you're a human being. We were dramatically gripped. We know what saved your life. We know you started and sold 3 successful companies. We know your deepest why. That's story craft in business. That story, although it is an investment of time and energy up front to craft anything. But in the craft of story, it's a time and investment energy up front. And I can't tell you how real this is behind the scenes. I'm a keynote speaker, right? I've done 1,000, 1,500 keynote speeches. What most people don't know about successful keynote speaking is behind the scenes. I get on the stage and hopefully I make it look really easy and I tell you 7 stories during a 90-minute keynote maybe, and they're all hitting and they all sound effortless and fantastic. And the behind the scenes secret is the amount of hours and time and energy I'm dedicating to craft the stories. Great story doesn't just pop out of your mouth the first time. Okay, so that's probably a different storytelling secret. But anyway, first step number 1 is I want to know that you chose the richest story to tell, and I want you to get away from thinking that it starts with credibility. They want you to move into thinking, yeah, heart, humanity, emotion, drama. Okay, cool. Oh, God, time flies. I love this topic so much. Okay. Number 2, stop telling the story and start sharing the experience. I'm going to move quickly through this one because I'm going to guess that you came to this call based on the blog that I wrote. And in that blog, let me just remind you, this is dramatic and this is huge. Telling the story sounds like this. I woke up or I was in high school one day and I found a note on the floor, crumpled up. Probably shouldn't have read it, but I couldn't help myself. I wondered what it said about somebody else. I read the note, and it was so terrible because it said it was about me, and it was somebody saying I looked fat in my clothing today, and it devastated me for years. I just told you a story. As a matter of fact, to most of the population, they don't know what's missing. They just hear the story and go, whoa, wow, can't believe that happened to you. And that's all well and good, except that story's going to get forgotten pretty fast. Secondly, people can look at their watch during that story. They can miss that story. And thirdly, that story, that's like taking gold to the bank and asking for $1 in return. Okay? It's undervaluing the story because you just told it. Here's the secret to telling us that when you're telling the story. Yeah, this happened to me. I'm going to tell you about something that happened in the past. I'm going to tell you just so that you know. It's really always just kind of, I'm telling you something that happened to me in the past, and I'm making it brief. But I'll tell you everything you need to know. That's what the storyteller thinks, but it's false. Sharing the experience starts with a completely different set of assumptions. My comedic one-man show, which I played around the world, including New York City for a month and HBO, and really on big stages, and it ended up to be a very big play in my life. I want to tell you, if you could see that show, it depends entirely on me finally coming to grips and understanding that I couldn't walk out on stage and tell the story. That if I walked on the stage and told the great story, I was going to die on stage and never get another gig. And I did that a lot of times. And then one day I discovered sharing the experience. And sharing the experience started with a different assumption. It said, I'm not going to tell you a story. I'm going to recreate a world for you, the same world that I was in externally and internally with my emotions, so that I'm not attempting to tell you the story. I'm attempting to put you into the story so that you become me. Watch what happens when you do that as a storytelling secret. The same story about the crumpled note in the hallway changes dramatically and goes. So I'm walking down the hallways of my high school, lockers on my right, lockers on my left. And I'm having this fantastic day, great hair day. I feel like I'm dressed so sexy. I'm wearing, my favorite blouse, this skirt I just bought over the weekend, this black knee-high skirt, and I've got these long black boots on. I feel so beautiful. I feel so attractive. And as I'm walking down the hallways, I'm feeling that, and I'm thinking about the class that I'm on my way to when I look down and I spot a crumpled up note on the floor. And my first feeling on the inside is sheer joy. I'm like, oh, joy, because a crumpled up note to me looks like a treasure sitting on the floor, a treasure of, like secrets into somebody else's life. Like, I want to read it, even though maybe I'm not supposed to. Maybe it's somebody else's private love note that got dropped on the floor. Maybe it's a breakup letter that I'm not supposed to see. Maybe it's a tell-all with sexy details that I'm not supposed to know. But joy of joys, I can't resist the temptation. I want to know what secrets it has to tell. So I bend down and I pick up the treasure and I open the note and I smooth it out and I dive in, and it says, Allie looks so fat in her clothes today. Did you see that ridiculous black skirt she's wearing? And the saddest part is, I bet she thinks she looks good. I just shared the experience with you. Okay? I told you, I allowed you to see what the hallways look like. I allowed you to know not only what I'm wearing, to see what I'm wearing, but I allowed you to know how I feel today. And so the combination of you knowing how I feel and knowing where we are in the world and what things look about, and the deepest secret, knowing my expectations, knowing that I expect to find joyful treasure in that letter, secrets about somebody else, puts you into my shoes, puts you there, so that when I read the letter out loud, I don't have to tell you. It's a sign of mediocre storytelling when you have to tell your audience how you feel. When you have to say, and it devastated me, and I felt horrible. By the time you've done your job as a storyteller, when you're sharing the experience, they'll know that it's devastating. They'll feel it themselves. All right. I'm going to move here to storytelling secret number 3. I'm going to get in all 5 for you. And that is tell your story in present tense. Okay? Not as a hard, fast, always rule, but as an almost always rule. My coaching clients will tell me a story and it's almost always put in past tense first. And it's an amazing little secret that all you have to do is say, tell it as if it's happening right now. Drop the past tense and say, I'm walking down the hallway of my high school. I'm 17 years old and I feel amazing. Okay? There's an immediacy to that. And human beings are attuned to immediate, to just happen, to is happening in front of me right now, as opposed to, I'm 50 years old, I'm standing on a stage and I go, so when I was 19 years old, it just has a very different ring. I've got a book of story masters in my office here. I grabbed a couple off of the shelf here. Spalding Gray, Paulo Coelho, John Leguizamo, some hallmark names in them, right there. And I opened up these stories. I knew in advance. I knew in advance what they would be, but I opened up these books that they've written, and they're writing in present tense also. For instance, this is the opening sentence of The Pilgrimage by Paulo Coelho, one of the world's greatest storytellers, the same guy that wrote The Alchemist and sold mega millions of copies of that great story. I want to get through all the secrets, but I want to tell you, watch great storytellers, and they tell stories most of the time in present tense. Tell your stories in present tense, sorry. Okay. Secret number 4. Start on a dramatic moment. Okay. Again, this is not a hard, fast rule. And in storytelling, there are really fantastic techniques and really great guidelines, and I'm covering some of them. They're reliable, and they're embedded in almost, you'll start to see them now in great storytelling. But storytelling is not just if you will, a science. It's not mechanical. It's also an art form, which means what you do is you build up a bag of tricks. And then you take each story on an individual basis and you look at which techniques should I apply to this story, which ones seem to lend itself to this story best. So I don't want to tell you that you should start every one of your stories on a dramatic moment. What I want you to know as a secret is that if you've got a story and you want to make that story better, the first place I would look with you, or I would direct you to look, is I would say, if you were my coaching client, is I would say, okay, so you told me the story in chronological order, which is what almost everybody does. What I'm listening for is, where's the dramatic moment in the story? When does the action kick in? And the dramatic moment means, when is something in jeopardy? When is there a problem? Okay? Because there'll usually be at least two very dramatic moments in a short story. The first dramatic moment is when the problem appears. The second really dramatic moment is when you, the hero, are conquering the problem. And that usually happens near the end of the story. Okay? So chances are you have 2 dramatic moments in your story. Both of them serve as really fantastic potential openings for the story. The one I'm going to direct you to look at most likely as the great opening for the story is the first dramatic moment in your story. The first one where you go, Houston, we have a problem. And what you'll see is that Hollywood is great at telling stories. So many, many movies start off on a dramatic moment. It's called cut to the chase. Okay, so if I want to tell somebody about how I got my start on a comedic one-man show, then I'll cut to the chase really fast. In a short amount of time, you'll hear something to this effect. Where I could go, I mean, I could tell you this long backstory about how I was falling in love with story and story is becoming more important. I was starting to notice story in my life, or I can cut to the chase and go, so I saw Spalding Gray tell a story to an audience in a theater in San Francisco, and we all gave him a standing ovation. But I wasn't just applauding. I was doing somersaults on the inside. And my girlfriend and I walked out the door, and I turned to her and I said, "Thank you so much for bringing me to that. He's amazing." And she said, "Yes, he is amazing, isn't he?" And I said, "What I would give to do that for a living." And she said in return, "Yeah, but you'd have to be funny." And I've gotten to the conflict in the story very quickly, because when she said, "Yeah, but you'd have to be funny," we can all hear she's saying, "But you're not." So I'm aspiring to be funny and entertaining like he is, but the first thing I'm up against is outside forces saying you're not good enough to do that. So look for the dramatic moment in your story and start on it. We can go back to the software guy's story, and you can see the dramatic moment. We just pulled it forward and said, what's the drama is you're surrounded by police cars. That's dramatic. We're starting right on it. It'll get your audience's attention. Okay. All right. Hey, Mike. Time's flying.
Yeah, you're good, buddy. You're good.
Let's take a break here, and I want to do a time check-in. Talk to me.
Yeah. So, why don't I jump in and grab the screen for a second, because as we're nearing the top of the hour, I know there's two things that we want to do. The first is we want to share this last story secret. And I know that you'll probably want to open up to see if there's any Q&A, and maybe even somebody that wants to jump out and get some live quick story coaching from you. And that's, to me, such an awesome way to hear you kind of show up and step into doing this work, because it's exciting to see you approach it, and there's a lot to learn from it. Is that what you're still available to do right now? Because if that's the case, then let me grab the presentation for a second. And because I know, everybody joining us here, a handful of you may have to go here at the top of the hour. I want to make sure that we share a really cool announcement that we've got brought to you in a big way by you, Patrick. So do you want me to do that, and then we'll swap back to close on the last secret here?
Yeah, please do. That'd be great.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Let me just take over that presentation real quick, and we'll do it. Let me know when you can see my screen. Go. All right. So thank you, Patrick, so much, man. So I just want to bring it around full circle for what we're really doing here. Evolved Enterprise, and the big idea here is about aligning the true soul of your business with more impact, meaning, and happiness that inevitably delivers even greater profits. And I think, Patrick, you, for me, have done an exceptional job of really bridging that piece in for us, because story represents, to me at least, and in the trends that I've been observing over the years, more than ever, the biggest area and opportunity for growth in a lot of impactful entrepreneurs in their business. If you, if you are out there and you stand for something, and let's say that you've got an impact that you're really passionate about bringing to the world through your work and through your gift and through your entrepreneurial artistry, it's not enough to just align to a cause and to have impact built into your business, because if you don't know how to share what you're doing, the story around it, and to communicate it effectively, it will be lost. It will be drowned out in the noise that's out there, and you stand to not really separate yourselves from the competition out there and from a really crowded marketplace. And story to me is the one thing that really separates those that are delivering value and getting that exposure. And storytelling right now is how we gain exposure to our business. It's how we, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, and social media, getting on stage to speak about what you're passionate about. All of this is storytelling. And these are really amazing techniques that you brought together. Now, and that ultimately all leads to even greater profits. So our framework and what we really stand for with Evolved Enterprise is really educating on all things that are around that framework. And you see this graphic here. It always, for us, in the way that we approach this education, it starts with you. And that's really the center of this graphic that you'll see here. And why that's important is because we're actually teaching a step-by-step framework on how to incorporate all of these principles for yourself and your business. And we've put together recently, and you may have seen this already if you're on this call. It's likely you have, but you may have seen something about our Evolved Business Blueprint. It's an absolutely new program that we've put together. We spent 6+ months developing it, and we're really excited about what we've got here. And we're doing something really special up until December 9th. And this is not just a step-by-step process, but the framework for how to apply all of these principles, primarily through the Evolved Enterprise book and through other techniques that we want to bring, directly to you to help amplify your business. And Patrick is a great example of an individual and the type of training that we want to be bringing to everyone that's a part of Evolved Enterprise, and specifically a part of our new program, the Evolved Business Blueprint. So there's something really special because of Patrick and his training that we're going to offer up. And I want to be able to share that with you really quickly, and then I'll pass this back to Patrick, and we'll get into the final secret that he has to share today. But this 12-week course revolves around 6 modules, and I want to go through them real quickly so you have a really good, clear idea of the type of course that we've put together here, and a really quick special offer that I think you're going to be really interested in if story and this type of information is resonating with you. So Module 1, Evolving You, and really starts with you. I mean, everything and everything around the work that we do with entrepreneurs has the presence of everything revolving around our own self-work and our own self-awareness. So at the center, at that core, is you, and all knowing about yourself at a deep level, and evolving yourself as an individual. And it's really about uncovering the underlying essence of what makes you truly happy and fulfilled, and integrating into a business that you absolutely love. I can just tell you on a personal level, this has been a path that I've been on for a great deal of my career, and it resonates with me in a huge way. We use the term entrepreneurial artistry, but really showing up and doing work like this is art. And we really get to the center of that entrepreneurial artistry and how to really shine by getting clear on your strengths and what you're great at, and learning how to spend really time in that space so that you can create there. So we start there with Module 1. Module 2 is around cause. This is really exciting for us because this is kind of the part that makes Evolved Enterprise special. It's about alignment to a bigger cause and a bigger reason, a big why, if you would. Basically, it's true fulfillment coming from having a reason that's being centered around what you do and what you create. And when this is done well, it's really about the alignment of your passion and that cause, and the merging of those two together. Viktor Frankl as well is a big inspiration for this module. Yannick, who's put together the content here, significantly influenced by Viktor Frankl's work, and I know Patrick, you've really dove into his work as well. And he goes into state, like we can bear any how with a big enough why, and it's really that module that we go deep on that side. And I'm going to go through the rest of these really quickly. So vision is another module we cover, and vision is huge. We have a lot of step-by-step processes on how you can create your own vision. We'll actually be sharing with some of those specifically that we've just created that will be, I think, an inspiration for you on creating your own vision and how to use that as a tool to inspire and attract high-level talent and clients, customers that really want to align themselves with who you are and what you're about. Understanding how to create that vision and share it is a big part of what that module contains. Module 4 is around culture, the attitudes, values, beliefs that make up the culture of your business, which have a huge impact on how you do what you do and how that spreads. Module 5 is around creation. And, we've got, from the creation aspect, we offer up the 11 Evolved Enterprise Impact Models, which we actually just launched a 2-page, beautifully designed PDF on, which if you don't have, you should swipe from our blog at evolvedenterprise.com/blog, and you'll be able to find it there. But on the creation pillar, really, it's about integrating your values, purpose, and vision in a way that really, has that, every sale has a baked-in impact that inspires, that's inspired from your cause. And there's a lot more. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be brushing over these really fast, but I want to be sensitive to time for everyone here. And then the last element here is module 6, which is, we call it the Community Code 2.0. And it's really tapping into the innate human desire to belong to a tribe. This is actually the module we cover story and other elements to it. But really, how to create the feeling of being part of something bigger than ourselves and actually transform the identity of your customers into a tribe of raving fans, zealots, and advocates who would do almost anything to really, that identify with your brand, will do anything to really help you build it. There's a lot of amazing brands out there like Harley Davidson, where people tattoo their logo on themselves. Those are great examples of identification of how a brand is able to transmute and transcend that space. It becomes something that people would do almost anything for. And that is something that there's a very specific process that you can go about that we teach that you can kind of incorporate that process into your business for massive impact. It's really exciting work. So this is basically the real quick and short of it. You can get full access to our 12-week course, which is including all 6 of those modules. Right now, what we're doing internally, this is a very special promotion here. The price is going to shift from $199 right now to $499 as of December 9th. And this is an opportunity for us to do a very soft entry for this program for our existing Evolved Enterprise list and everyone that's been following Evolved Enterprise, whether you bought our book or you've been a huge fan of Yannick's over the years. It's something for us to really get this out there for the first time, and then we're going to be shifting how we're approaching this, and the price is going to go up with it as well as we're going to be removing a couple of time-sensitive bonuses. Now, the big add here is, and we're really thrilled that Patrick's going to do this with us, but Patrick's actually introducing a new bonus for this offer. If you've seen it so far, he's actually going to throw in a very special live 3-part storytelling workshop. And the focus here is that it's very custom tailored to everyone who's purchasing the Evolve Business Blueprint now, where we're going to actually allow members that are buying the program to fill out a really quick entry form and there's a really big chance that you can actually get your story workshopped live with Patrick during this series. And it's an extra bonus on top of everything else that we're offering that we really feel like is something that would strengthen the value you'd get out of really stepping into this really unique offer. So thank you, Patrick, for obviously making that available. And everyone on here, if you haven't already, check this out. Now, if you already purchased the blueprint, you're getting this bonus on top of that. But if you haven't, go ahead and go over to evolvedenterprise.com/blueprint. and you can check out all the details. And there's a lot more that I skipped over really quickly. Forgive me for that. You can get all the details on that page, and all the extra bonuses, including a really cool startup startup series with Yannick and Dmitry Kozlov, which will be phenomenal. That alone is, like we're throwing a lot at this and putting a lot of value, because we really want to create the best product out there in the space that tailors to impactful entrepreneurs, and we believe this is it. So we put our heart and soul into designing and developing what that course would be. So go ahead there, evolvedenterprise.com/blueprint. Jump in there, get started. I'm going to pass this back over to Patrick to wrap us up on the final secret, and then even take some Q&A, and let that be kind of a taste that you'll get for his 3-part live bonus series that you'll be able to attend after you join us with the Blueprint. We'd love to have you. Patrick, I'm going to pass this back to you, man. Thanks so much, buddy, and take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mike. So I was listening to that, and I was thinking about the story in that, and what you just did, Mike. And I know Mike, and I know I'm really getting to know Yannick. I know Mike more than I know Yannick. But I also have the book Evolved Enterprise by Yannick Silver, and I read it, and I think about the story in Evolved Enterprise. And I want to say that this is a really good example that we're listening to right there about story and story opportunity. See, what just happened is somebody, always in our business we have to tell the story, and there's so many different ways to slice that. So what I hope to bring to the table for whoever's listening, if you're hearing my voice right now, what I'm saying to you is you got to tell the story of your business, right? Under various different circumstances. Mine are extreme, but really no less extreme than, what if you're on a webinar? What if you're at a business conference? What if you're having coffee with an important new potential business team member or business investor? It comes down to, so tell me the story of your business. It's happening all the time. And what I'm saying is a really good move is for you to stop thinking about what are the features and the benefits. Let me tell the features and the benefits of my business. Let me try and give them, a business perspective on my business, which is what we've all been trained to do, what we've all heard too much of, and go, how can I elevate this conversation so that it is more compelling, it is more memorable, dare I say it's more entertaining, it's more gripping, it's more dramatic, with a story. Because the answer is, how do you do that? You bring the right story to bear. So real life case example, right? So I grabbed the book off the shelf, the Evolved Enterprise, and again, I've read it, I'm familiar with it, and I love the work. It's the only reason I'm doing this this webinar and then this bonus series is I love what Evolved Enterprise stands for. I'm familiar with it. I love that it's a cause play in the world. But I want to read you from the top of page 23. This is story. Listen. Imagine Yannick saying this as he walks out on the stage. Imagine this is entering at the dramatic moment. Okay? From the outside, most people would think I had achieved total success. I was making a lot of money online by truly helping people. I built up a great reputation in the marketplace. I drove a cool car, Aston Martin. I had an incredible family. I would put this in present tense. I'm reading from the book, but do you hear it? Present tense, I'd go. At this point, I would pick whatever age he was. So let's say I'm going to pick 38. Listen to the transformation right in front of you. I'm 38 years old. From the outside, most people think I've achieved total success. I'm making a lot of money online, truly helping people. I built up a great reputation in the marketplace. I drive an Aston Martin. I have an incredible family. I live in a really nice neighborhood, etc., etc. Don't get me wrong. I am extremely grateful and appreciative for everything I have. It's just I am not totally happy. Enter the conflict. We're good listeners. We knew the minute he was starting from the minute the cue words from the outside have cued the listener to go, uh-oh, something is amiss. And that's when you sit up in your chair, because human beings love to hear when something is amiss. If something wasn't amiss, there's no story. There's no story, all right? If everything's good, you don't have a story. Think about that for your own product, okay? If you go, everything's great with our product, I'm going to tell you how everything's great, you don't have a story because nothing is amiss. How would you like to see my new Hollywood film where nothing is amiss? You don't want to go see that movie, all right? So I love this. Page 23, just convert it to present tense, and something is amiss, and now your audience can put down their forks and go, huh, Yannick, not happy. What happens next? All right? Now, the book form is different, so this isn't criticism because I'm just pulling from a book and I'm doing this on the fly, but we can learn from it. In book form, the book makes a mistake that I recommend not doing in storytelling. He says, maybe you've experienced the same thing. Cut that. You don't need to tell your audience that. Keep them in a good story. If they've experienced the same thing, if you're doing your job as a storyteller, they'll think to themselves, oh my gosh, I've been there. I've been not totally happy, even though I should be also. Okay? And so that's just a small example of how you get into the story of evolved enterprise. And you got the listener hooked because something's a problem. And then in good storytelling now, you have to, now that you know something's a problem, explain the problem more and go, here's the thing, like, yes, everything looked good from the outside, but I wasn't totally happy. And it was because, I'm going to pick up from his words now here, I'm going to convert them to emotions. I have a nagging notion inside I can't shake that I'm designed for greater things. I feel like I want to put all my talents, passions, and resources into something bigger. Some people would like to discount what I'm feeling and call it burnout, but it's much bigger than that, okay? It's beyond a sense of discontent or frustration, and then I'm looking for the resolve, so I turn the page here in the book, and it says, I know my greatest contribution lays somewhere else, that everything in my life has been a setup for something greater. So I dove into journaling and reflection, thinking about how Steve Jobs talked about how all the passions in your life make sense when you look backwards, not forwards. And I made a discovery. Now your audience is leaning forward. What's the discovery? My discovery was that I was happiest when I was actively engaged in 3 areas. And those 3 areas became the basis of evolved enterprise. Let's talk about evolved enterprise today. So here how, that's my first draft. And I've told you before, a great crafted story always starts with the first draft, and a lot of work and diligence comes after it, finding the exact right words, the exact, the demands of the story. Giving it all the time it needs, but being as economical as possible. But what I notice is that for every business, including yours, whether your business is a career like I have or an actual business with employees like many of my friends have, a good story is a phenomenal tool for creating engagement and telling the story of your business, or at least opening people up to be ready to receive all the details. Okay, so, and look, I love Evolved Enterprise. I love the construct of the program, and I'm really excited to be a part of teaching the story aspect. because I'm thrilled. My three-part series is going to deep dive into helping you tell the story of you and your mission. Okay. So I'm going to get this. I'm going to share the screen again. I hope this works. It says, let's see, show my screen. Let's see if that works. Hopefully it's up there. And if it is,
It is. You
it's
got it, buddy.
okay, good. So this is the darn near the last point that I brought for today, and it says, give your story the time it deserves, but stay on point. And that's because so many of my coaching clients tell me a story, and internally I'm freaking out because I'm saying, oh my God, you're leaving out so many important details. Where are you? How old are you? What happened in between that and that? You just skipped over that. And all that is a signpost that says you're doing what most people have just kind of normalized, which is assuming that if you tell me the whole story, you're going to be wasting my time. And that is a storytelling sin. When you come over to story, as you learn story craft, the first thing you embrace is, if I recognize the value in a story, I'm going to really tell that story the way it deserves to be told, which means I'm not going to feel rushed to tell it, but I'm also not going to be one of those storytellers that just tells you all these superfluous details that waste your time, you know. But that's one of the great secrets, is I'm constantly having to tell my clients, no, you're not. You're actually wasting my time by telling me the story that economically and that short, missing that many details. You're wasting my time when you tell me such a bad story. So if they're telling me a story in a minute, chances are I'm going to say, tell it to me in 3 minutes. Come on, you got 3 minutes. Tell me the story. And some of those 3-minute stories well justify a 4-minute story. Okay, but if you just take that as just a loose rule of thumb, think about the stories you're telling, and imagine me, Patrick Combs, as your coach in your ear saying, come on, tell me more of the story. Give it a couple more minutes and see what happens. Because most people are shorting their story on time because of a little voice I want you to push away that says, I don't want to waste anybody's time with my story. Okay? All right. And then this is a point, consider this a bonus point, but I just want you to start thinking about it, and that's start right now building a vault of personal stories. I want to break you out immediately out of a model in your head that goes, the answer to what's my story is a single answer, because it's not. It's not a single great story. I don't want you to think you're on the road to becoming a person that has 3 stories. What I want you to do is start looking through everywhere in your life to build up as many stories as you can that are options. The greatest thing you can do is to go, hey, I've got these 25 story possibilities, and have that as a list, a tickler file, and look it over and go, okay, great, yeah. I used to think I only had 3 because they all had something super special. People seem to really like them. But I do have these other 22 that they could be okay. In those other 22 that could be okay, when you start to learn the craft of story and how to turn okay stories into gold stories, you find that your very best stories are hiding somewhere in those other ones you had currently overlooked. So I want you to start now building a vault of personal stories, and that just means make a conscientious effort to ask your brain, hey, what stories do I have from my life that might apply to my business, telling people who I am, what I value, what I do, things I've overcome, life experiences that are interesting that I've had, and I want you to start putting them all, write them all down so that they're in one place, because I guarantee you from personal experience, if you don't write them down in one place, you'll lose your stories, you'll forget your stories, you'll overlook your treasures, okay? Maybe what happened for me will happen to you. I built a vault of personal stories. I would give them all care and attention and write them out and craft them. And then one day it became just an easy book to make. I went, hey, I'm going to take 40 of my top stories. I'm going to put them in a book now. And I have a brand new book out. This is called This Surprising Life. And it's really just opening my vault of personal stories told in a book. So you might end up with you might think you have one story right now, and you might discover in a relatively short amount of time that you have a ton of stories. And I wanted to make sure you understood this on the call. I have been talking about story as a verbal technique, but that is a very limited assumption. Story is a video technique, and story is a label technique, and story is a copy technique. So for instance, on the label, look at this, story on a label. I saw this in Whole Foods. It's a great story, by the way, too. He says, Rufus Teague made some sauce. He put some in a jar and shared it with the boys. They kept on paining him till he brewed up some more. They kept on paining him till he fixed up another batch. Next thing you knew, he's making sauce all the time. It's damn good. That is smart storytelling on the label in Whole Foods. I don't know how many brands of sauce there are, but there's only one single sauce that caught my eye, because human beings, it's almost impossible for a human being to ignore a story. And that's a good story right there. You go, oh, Rufus Teague, he made some sauce. All right, so story everywhere. I'll skip this one. I'll go through this one really. I won't really read this one. But story on the back of my chai, my chai, that told me that her mother must have made her chai when she was a kid. Beautiful. That's a good start. All right, so that was five. That was more than 5 story secrets. We probably got in 7 of them there. But let's open up this call to do some live coaching and some Q&A on this thing. Geez, my time flies. I am so verbal.
Aha, you did. Thank you so much, Patrick. Really appreciate it, man. So here would be the next step. And this is something, if you're really wanting to put yourself out there, which I highly recommend you should, you can, if you want to jump out to do a quick crafting of a really quick back and forth with Patrick on story, go ahead and hit the raised hand feature, and we can pull you out. We got Ann here. Let's pull you out, Ann. Let me see if I can unmute you here. Hey, Ann, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you guys?
Where are you from, Ann?
I live in Idaho.
All right, Idaho. All right, Patrick, I'll let you work your magic.
Hi, Ann. How are you?
I'm so good. Thanks for giving me some space.
Absolutely. Ann, what's your story? Tell me your story.
Yeah, which one? I was just writing my story for a web page, and listening to your call is making me think what I was writing. So I was writing the story of why I started my business and the moment in which I knew I could not just go get another job as a 9-to-5 to put my son in daycare just to pay the bills. I needed to do some work that was meaningful. I wanted to make a contribution, and I wanted to have fun. And I was asking, what would that be? What would that be? I have a master's degree in history, and I did not want to do more historian work, and I wanted something more. And in meditation, what came to me was a vision of myself laughing with people and sharing joy and traveling the world. And it lit me up so much. I said, I have to do that. I have to learn how to do that. So that's what I devoted my life to 7 years ago. And now I'm working with other people to do the same. But that's my moment that I was writing about. Trying to get some static on that.
So, Ann, there's a wave of static passing through the line, but I think that I heard 90% of that. I didn't hear your last sentence or two. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you again.
Okay. So here's the thing. I said, tell me your story, and then you said what you said. And I want to grant that, one, you told me right up front you're just crafting it. You're just beginning to work on it. I completely want to acknowledge you for raising your hand and saying, look, let me get some live coaching in a very raw state, which is the way to be, right? And so yours is an example, which does not surprise me in any way, where I said, tell me your story, and what you kind of did. Because in my mind, I can go, okay, I can kind of extract a story there, And it's kind of a story about a moment where you were wondering what to do next and you were meditating and you got a vision and said, I have to do that. That's what that's what my that's what I'm able to extract, right?
Right.
So coaching, and it's very typical because there is story there, but I call that explanation. Like, you explained to me how you made the choice. So it's to say, like, I heard story, but really I call that explanation. And most people are doing that. They're explaining their business, right? So if we step into the great opportunity here on the table, the first thing I almost have to do is I have to say, is we have to work on this permission thing. We have to go, and I tell stories for a living. People depend on me to tell a story like once upon a time. And because I live in that permission space where if I don't do that, I don't get paid or I don't get asked back, I'm all in a space that you're not mentally all in on yet. And that's the great first secret for you, is I want you to imagine that you're paid to tell that story and that the story needs to be put into story structure. So the first thing I'd say, Anne, is I'd go, for artificial purposes, you got to go, okay, I'll tell you a story, Patrick. It's January 13th. I'm this many years old. I'm sitting in meditation it's got to start like a story. Try it real quick.
All right. It's July. I'm sitting on the sofa nursing my 1-year-old son, praying for guidance once again. I'm scared to death because I know my marriage is ending and I don't know what's next. I don't know how I'll support myself or my son, but I know I have to do something meaningful. I know I have to do something that's fun. I know I want to make a contribution, and I'm not willing to get a 9-to-5 job. And I'm praying. I'm asking for guidance, and I'm scared. And in that moment, I was relaxed enough after laughing as a practice that a vision came in meditation. So I'll pause there just for your feedback.
Phenomenal. Quantum leap forward. Amazing. That's my feedback. So, so what you needed is you really needed a little nudge and a lot of permission to become the storyteller.
Right. Okay?
But look what you did right. It's July. The first part I loved is, oh good, okay, that was this year. Good, that satisfies it. I'm sitting nursing my 1-year-old. Picture. Wow, okay. And then you go to humanity and vulnerability. My marriage is ending. I'm scared. I'm afraid. I have these aspirations. Bam! Like you're knocking it out of the park. People are putting their forks down. We're now falling in love with you. You're human. You're admirable. This is what people don't understand, is we admire courage. And anybody in a precarious situation is courageous. So you're being so courageous in that story, right? So we can't look away. We're already rooting for you. We don't know what's going to happen next. The only thing I wanted you to do that we would improve a little bit more is I wanted you I want you to become what I call the naive narrator. Okay, the naive narrator doesn't know what's going to happen next. And this is one of those really subtle mastery techniques, which is I want you to imagine, and that as you're sitting on the couch, you don't know you're going to have a vision. You don't even know you're going to meditate. You don't know your life's going to change that day. And right now, we can all hear it in your voice that you kind of do know, and you're kind of going to tell us that you're just ahead of us. You're slightly ahead of us. So if you want to really increase the drama in any story and get people to scoot to their edge of their chair, you remember to be as naive as they are. So you have this beautiful opportunity in story where you go, I'm frustrated, I'm scared, I want meaningful work, I have no idea what to do. I close my eyes, I put my thumbs to my middle fingers in that meditative pose, and I'm praying for a miracle. when suddenly I see a vision. So, I wanted more. I wanted you to, you were kind of accelerating through the moment, and I want you to slow down in the moment because the first, remember, there's two conflicts generally, right? The first conflict is, oh my God, you're in trouble. Your life's, you're looking for a job, your marriage is falling apart, and you're afraid. And the second, the second really dramatic moment is when you're in meditation and you don't know what's going to happen next, and a vision appears. So I wanted you to slow down and really give that moment permission to be as it was, to be as precarious, unknown, and as exciting as it was to you, and pregnant as it was to you. Okay? But look,
Yeah.
that's a good way to tell it orally, and that's a good way to tell it in writing. The writing will be a little bit longer. The oral will be a little bit shorter. That's the way it goes.
Okay. Fabulous. That's so helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Mike Budney.
That was awesome, man.